Jersey's own Zach Gelb.
Or maybe it's Pennsylvania. Anyhow, it's one of the two, I'm pretty sure.
The Zach Gelb Show continues
On Fox Sports 920, The Jersey.
Can't wait for the draft next week in Philadelphia. Can't wait to cover it in the city of brotherly love. We're going to be doing some shows out from the NFL draft. This is the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920. The Jersey number, as always, 609-919-9200. And with the draft, you have all these mock drafts, you have all these draft experts, and one that I love to read at FanRag is actually Joe Marino, who is a draft analyst for FanRag and is also the assistant director of scouting for NDT Scouting. And Joe Marino, who we talked to back in March, is kind enough to hop on board with us once again as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft next week. Joe, appreciate a few minutes. Thanks for the time, and how are you?
Yeah, doing well, Zach. Thanks for reaching out, and we are just, 9 days away from what we've all been waiting for.
Yeah, it's crazy, and you keep on seeing all these mock drafts, and you have all the rumors. This time of the year, it's just an absolute frenzy. By the way, I saw something in the sporting news yesterday that it had the Eagles down to 5 names, and they said that one of these 5 players are going to be on the Eagles at number 14. Charles Harris, Derek Barnett, Garyon Conley, Christian McCaffrey, and John Ross. In all of your predictions and all the information that you have had acquired, out of those 5 names, who do you think the most likely is to land with the Eagles?
Well, I think it's probably Garyon Conley, should he be available. I think he really fits what they want to do in terms of bump and run coverage on the outside with ball skills, playmaking potential, and the perimeter. That's something the Eagles need desperately. He fits what Jim Schwartz wants to do on defense. And if he's available right there, I think the Eagles are at 14. That would be a tremendous value at a position of need.
So Conley, you have him. When you look at Conley, is there a pro player that some people say, hey, he kind of resembles him? Who's a pro player that you could compare him to?
The comp that I like that I've seen before is actually Stephon Gilmore, who's a player familiar with Jim Schwartz, mostly because those are really good physical at-the-line type cornerbacks. Conley has 33-inch arms. He's certainly able to really get a nice jam and make that release very difficult. And then you combine that with really nice ball skills down the field. He gets a little aggressive at times trying to break on the football and guessing a little bit on routes, but from an athleticism perspective and overall man coverage ability, I think you can get a really nice starting cornerback out of Garyon Conley.
And the Eagles have a bevy of needs. We know they have to address corner. They have to still address a long-term plan at wide receiver. Wouldn't surprise me if they go with an edge rusher. So I'd be okay with Garyon Conley. But when you get to wide receivers, and that's a sexy pick right there for the Eagles if they are making it at number 14, because you have Alshon, you have Torrey Smith, and you want to team up a lot of wide receivers with the young quarterback in Carson Wentz. A lot of people are still holding out some hope for Mike Williams or either Davis. I'm going to assume that neither of them would be available at 14. How early do you think those 2 guys will be going?
Yeah, what I'm really hearing is Tennessee likes Mike Williams a lot, and we're talking number 5 overall pick a lot. So I think that's where you're going to see Mike Williams go. Corey Davis is a wild card. He's somebody that I did a mock draft for FanRag Sports that released yesterday. He's a player that I had some difficulty slotting, and that's interesting because he's my number 1 wide receiver. I love him, but when you start thinking about some of the needs and some of the value, I actually had him going to Baltimore, so a few picks after Philadelphia. Wow. So that's a possibility. For me, I think that Corey Davis is in play at 14, and if he's there, you might want to take Corey Davis over a cornerback because this cornerback class is so deep. You can probably get starting caliber guys in the second round where your best chance at an alpha number 1 wide receiver really comes in the form of Mike Williams and Corey Davis, and that's it.
I see some mock drafts have John Ross, the receiver out of Washington, the speedster, going in the top 10. Where do you have Ross going?
In my mock draft that came out yesterday, I had him going number 8 to Carolina. Not necessarily where I would value him, but when you start, forecasting and valuing is a little different. So when I think about Carolina, I think about a team that needs speed. They have all those giant weapons in Olsen and Benjamin and Funchess, but little in the way of speed. Tengin's gone. Corey Brown's gone. So they need someone that can stretch the field and create some after the catch. And Cam Newton's not going to be able to throw a football until July, so he needs some efficiency around him where he can work the ball ball to short areas and let guys create, and needs a running game to rely on. So John Ross would provide that speed element, and that's about as high as I can see him going. And then the floor would probably be Tampa Bay, where they can use a similar weapon.
We've seen Belichick in his career just master really moving back in the draft. And I know as a fan standpoint, when you put this time commitment into the draft, it gets very tough to watch that first round when you're waiting to make a pick, and then your owner and coach is just your general manager is just finding a way to keep on moving back. But hey, it definitely has worked for Bill Belichick. So with the Eagles and all their needs, do you see a chance maybe the Eagles move back, or not so much because 14's a pretty good pick and also the draft's in Philly?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with who's available that somebody would want to trade up for. So it's a lot of fans and they come at me and they want we need to trade back. Well, sure, but in this draft, who's somebody going to trade up for that maybe you should be taking anyways? So it really is going to depend on how things fall. If you're an Eagles fan, you really need to root for all the quarterbacks to get drafted, 4 of them to go before you, so that talent gets pushed down that you need to consider drafting, or that somebody will fall that somebody's going to want to trade up for, because this is a pretty deep draft. And so when you have a deep draft, everybody wants to trade back. And so the reality is everybody can't. So it's a nice idea, but there's got to be 2 to tango.
With the quarterbacks, because we also cover the Jets in this area in South Jersey and also Philadelphia. The Jets, they need a quarterback. I don't love quarterback for the Jets at 6, but who will be available that is a quarterback at 6 in your opinion?
Well, the thing for whoever's going to play quarterback for the Jets next year is the infrastructure around that quarterback is very poor. So I'm rooting for a quarterback to not go there, just because I think it'd be a really difficult situation with a lot of pressure and expectations that can't be fulfilled because the talent around that quarterback is going to be poor. I think Mitchell Trubisky is going to be a player that goes in the top 5. So Deshaun Watson, if that's going to be the next kind of guy, Patrick Mahomes, I think those would be the 2 players that if the Jets wanted to consider at 6 for a quarterback, that's going to be the 2 guys.
With 1 and with Mitch Trubisky, how much of a chance are you giving it? I know that some people are changing their picks at number 1. How much of a percentage would you give it that Cleveland ends up taking him number 1 overall?
I'll throw 25% out there just to give you a number. It's one thing that when Schefter came out with that news that there's some internal disconnect between, whether or not they want to go with Myles Garrett, who's everyone's believed to be the number 1 player in this draft that Cleveland would pick. But the reality is, if they want to get Mitchell Trubisky, the only way to guarantee they can get him is to take him number 1 overall. And so they've got that other pick right there at number 12 where they can address some other needs. But the only way to get Trubisky, take him number 1. And there's some internal, discussion on whether or not Myles Garrett has the play demeanor, has that physical edge of a face of a defense that's causing some dissension. And plus, they love Trubisky. Trubisky loves them. So it's a really nice marriage. And, that's something that it still would surprise me. But there's some teeth to those rumors.
If Trubisky doesn't go number 1, you say he's going to go in the top 5, who's that next team in the top 5 that takes him?
I think San Francisco right there at number 2. I was at the UNC Pro Day where Mitchell Trubisky worked out, and right there standing next to me was John Lynch, the GM of the 49ers. They're year 1 of their 6-year deal, him and Kyle Shanahan. So why not go ahead and marry yourself to the quarterback and have your guy? The expectations are low to start, and they have Brian Hoyer, who's a nice bridge quarterback that can stand in there and take the bullets until the infrastructure is in place, and Trubisky can, eventually start for them. I really think they ought to go ahead and get their guy right now.
We know Watson is a winner. We saw that in his college career, just an exceptional football player. We see how it's going to translate to the NFL. Time will tell. And then Mahomes is really picking up a lot of steam as of late. And I remember seeing him at the Super Bowl this year, going around radio show to radio show on Radio Row with his agent and Lee Steinberg. But with Mahomes and Watson, how do you project them as pros?
Watson, obviously you love all the intangibles. It's all there. Really, really just kind of that it factor from a quarterback. But at the same time, He's got some issues with turnovers and field vision, not seeing underneath defenders. He throws 30 interceptions the last 2 seasons, and then he struggles with his accuracy. And the issue with that is the same throw he's missed over the last 3 years, he's still missing them. So some of that ball placement down the field is inconsistent. But is there enough dual threat ability? Is there enough intangibles to elevate him to overcome those issues? I think he's a starting quarterback, but it might take a little bit of time for him to reach his full potential. And then Patrick Mahomes is complete wild card in this draft, right? He's got as much potential and arm talent as anybody, but he's coming from that Texas Tech scheme where his thought was touchdown and then check down. So there's so much, NFL passing game concepts that he has to learn. But from a physical perspective, he's the most physically talented cornerback in this draft, no question.
Joe Marino with us right now on the Zach Gelb Show from FanRag, and also the Assistant Director of Scouting for NDT Scouting. Joe, getting back to the Birds, McCaffrey, chances that McCaffrey lands with the Eagles, in your opinion?
It would be difficult for me to see that happen just because I don't disagree that running back's a position of need, but it is a deeper running back class, with the options that could be available day 2. You really need help at positions that are premier positions in terms of wide receiver, cornerback, pass rusher, and those really need to take precedent over a running back.
With the Eagles, I would love to see at number 14 them get a corner or get a wide receiver. I'm thinking more corner like you are. And then in the second round, maybe still have Dalvin Cook available. They may have to trade up early into that second round, although they do have a pretty early pick. But with the Eagles and Dalvin Cook and just Cook's draft stock, a lot of times people thought he was a can't-miss first-rounder, and now we're seeing some early second-round projections. So with Cook, when does he finally go off the board?
Well, I know for a fact that he's off of 16 teams draft board. So
wow.
There are he's got massive off-the-field red flags.
Sure.
He has a slew of issues with some violence and some property damage and some gang-related type stuff that's really scaring off teams. I've been told that the franchise, the city that he goes to, is really going to have to prepare themselves for the people that he's going to bring in. That's very concerning for teams. Number 2, he's had 3 shoulder surgeries since he's been out of high school, and that's very concerning for a running back. Obviously, he's very talented. He's the best running back in terms of on-field in this class for me, and that's not close. But those other things that work against him, are really working against him right now.
Is there any chance that he goes through the first 2 rounds unpicked?
Oh, I think the second round really is his sweet spot. So if you're asking me right now to say yes or no, I don't think he's going to get out of the second round. But it'd be more of a surprise to see him get drafted in the first round at this point for me.
Now, a lot of people, and this isn't going to sound right, but it's a reality of the situation, but it seems like it is changing a bit. A lot of people were looking past Cook originally because there was no video with all his disgusting acts that are alleged of him. But with Joe Mixon, there was a video. So some people thought that Cook was going to go before Mixon. But I saw in your latest mock draft that you had Mixon go in 27. So you think it's a pretty good chance that Mixon does go in the first round?
Yeah, I think there's a better chance that Joe Mixon goes in the first round than Dalvin Cook. Again, Joe Mixon, one altercation, disgusting, horrible altercation.
No question.
But it's a one and done, and Dalvin Cook has lingering, repetitive history, a slew of things over the last 4 years. So I think that's where you find a little bit more comfort, if you will, in going after a Mixon than a Cook.
So it seems like Mixon then feels a little bit more remorseful, I would have to assume, when he's in these interviews, because this narrative about a month ago, it was more that Cook was going to go before Mixon, but like you're saying, it seems like that's changing. So how did Mixon make himself look a little bit better to teams even after that just despicable incident that he did have?
Well, he must be doing something well in the interview process, and at the end of the day, NFL teams are trying to collect talent, and some of that other stuff is always going to be secondary. But the most important thing, like Bill Belichick says, your best ability is your availability, and I think teams are just more comfortable given, Mixon's issues were several years ago. He's basically been fine. He had an issue with the traffic ticket where he ripped up the card, and, he had that issue. But by and large, his incidents are behind him, where Dalvin Cook's, continue to show up and really have each year over the last 4 years.
With your connections and all you know about this draft, we keep on hearing a lot about the guy that's going to be placed in the draft board in Philadelphia, in Joe Douglas. Can you give us a little more insight on Joe Douglas and how you think he will fare running this draft with the Eagles, although Howie Roseman, I do get, has the final say?
Yeah, I always, Howie Roseman's still there. I think it's going to be very much still a Howie Roseman feel. You see this all the time where these types of shifts happen, but at the end of the day, I still think this is. I'm not sure there's going to be any new feel to this Eagles draft.
Wrapping up with Joe Marino is kind enough to spend a few more minutes with us. The Giants at 23. Joe, where do you put the Giants having it at number 23 in this draft?
Well, I went with offensive tackle for them. I think
Smart
it's going to
man.
be a sweet spot where they can get one of the top 5 offensive tackles in this draft. They can get Eric Flowers moved over to right tackle, improve the offensive line at 2 positions, tight ends in play if David Njoku were to fall. And then I've been saying for 5 years they need a face of their defense on the second level, a true playmaking linebacker. Their linebacking core is very underwhelming to me in terms of the personnel that's on the roster. So those would be the 3 areas that I would see them going, but I'm really starting to lean offensive tackle because it makes them better at 2 positions.
Now, I keep on reading everything, and it says that the Lions love Hassan Reddick. Is there any chance Hassan Reddick gets past the Lions and is available for the Giants at 23?
No, I don't. That's something that's rang through since the Combine. That's one of the things that's been very buzzy. Detroit loves Hassan Reddick, and I don't see him getting past them.
With Hassan Reddick, how early do you think he could go? I know he had a visit with the Jags this week. That's a top 10 pick in the draft, so what's the earliest you could see Reddick going?
I've heard some rumors about Tennessee at 5, even though Mike Williams seems to be the buzz there. I could see him going as early as number 10 to Buffalo, a team that needs speed on the second level right now. Sean McDermott's going from, Thomas Davis and Luke Kuechly to Preston Brown and Reggie Ragland. Huge drop off in terms of speed. So I think Buffalo is in play at 10. It wouldn't surprise me to see him go 4, 5, or 10. But then, at the same time, you can see him falling into the 20s, but he's definitely not getting past Detroit.
Well, I love the Temple guys, being someone that's from Temple University as an alum and did their games for a bunch of years. I'm actually doing an autograph signing with Hassan Reddick and Deion Dawkins this weekend. We'll get that out in just a second to the listening audience. But with Deion Dawkins, how about Deion? I would have to assume you're hearing a lot of steam. I saw one NFL.com draft putting him at pick number to the Falcons at 31. I don't think he's going to go in the first round, but how early in the second round do you see Deion going?
Yeah, he's an interesting player in this class because I think he's got a lot of tools in terms of length, athletic ability, but he's very raw in terms of some of the technical sides of the game. So I don't think he's in that top 5 group, that top tier of tackles in this class. I think he's more second tier. But at the same time, there's not a lot of depth to this offensive tackle class. So, if everybody's counting on Deion Dawkins being available in the 3rd round, he's not going to be available in the 3rd round. So he's a player that I think is maybe a middle of the second round to later parts of the second round, depending on how the first tier of offensive tackles ultimately goes.
I saw a video on Twitter of him doing a handstand actually last week. I don't know how many 315-pounders could do a handstand and also dunk a basketball. It seems like he's an athletic freak.
Yeah, and that's what you're looking for at an offensive tackle, guys that can move, guys that can hang with these talented speed rushers in the NFL. They got to be able to compete with them to their landmarks on the edge track. So that's the type of movement skills. We've seen guys that are unrefined, like a Teron Armstead with the Saints pick a couple years ago, just a ball of clay in terms of length and athletic ability. And, you take the technical things and work on them. So, that's really going to serve him well when it comes to his draft stock.
I got 2 more for you. So with FanRag and then also NDT Scouting, what are your plans for the draft? Are you coming to Philly or no?
No, so we are headed to Phoenix, Arizona to the FanRag offices, and we are doing live internet stream broadcasts of the game. So Kyle Krabs, myself, and John Owning will be going up against ESPN and NFL Network with a live internet stream if anyone's looking for an alternative.
Well, that's awesome. We'll definitely check it in and we'll get it out there on the web. Joe, before we let you run, I always am curious about this with these scouting experts and all these draft analysts like yourself. How'd you get involved with this? And tell me a little bit about your craft when you're making some of these mock drafts, which I know some people will love you, some people will send you a bunch of hateful tweets and everything, but we have fun with it. So take me through a little bit about how you became this draft expert.
Well, it really started about 15 years ago. I grew up a Buffalo Bills fan, and the Bills haven't made the playoffs in 17 years. So I look forward to the draft very, very much. So just a love for football and wanting to learn more about it. In doing so, and then just taking different opportunities to create sources and write and build connections that got me to the point where I've been able to be published. And through that, different credentials trip, building, networking, working hard. And before you know it, you get a chance to be part of a great company like FanRag Sports and NDT Scouting. And in terms of the mock draft piece of that, it's interesting. A lot of it is just what you're hearing, throwing some darts and trying to connect dots as best you can based on logic. So don't put too much into it. I think the best mock drafters get about 28% right on their final mock. So, this is the best reality TV you can get, what we're going to get to see next week.
Man, it's better than most tests I took when I was in school. Hey, Joe, this is a whole lot of fun. By the way, one more thing. I don't think you still live in Buffalo, but do you miss the Duff's, the Anchor Bar, and little Ted's hot dogs as well?
Are you kidding? The good thing about I'm in Charlotte now. Most of Buffalo has moved to Charlotte, so there's a lot of great places to get wings down here in the Charlotte area. But we go up to Buffalo enough to get our fix there as well. So definitely miss the authentic food though.
Hey, Joe, enjoy these next few days. We appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, Zach. Thank you.
There's Joe Marino joining us, draft analyst for FanRag and also the assistant director of scouting for NDT Scouting. If you want to see Hassan Reddick and Deion Dawkins this weekend, Sunday, April 23rd, from 1 to 2, I will be there with them, actually, as I'm taking them to this autograph appearance. $20 for an autograph for one player. You get $30 for both. It's appearing at a place called Popple Sports Autographed and Collectibles in the Plymouth Meeting Mall. It's on the first level near the escalators across from the food court. This is very specific. I like it. 500 West Germantown Pike, Suite 1375, Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. Visit www.popple.com for more info. That's www.poppel.com. You have a chance if you want to meet some guys. One guy's definitely going to go in the first round. The other guy's probably going to go in round number 2. That is Hassan Reddick and Deion Dawkins. Two fun guys, and they'll be doing an autograph appearance this weekend.